named Sam sat on a rock. I'm very proud of her right now. A very sad expression was on his face. He was so sad, in fact, that he began crying softly. His crying became louder, and soon he was crying uncontrollably. He actually fell off the rock. The rock said in a loud voice, actually you said what's wrong, Sam? And Sam replied, I'm crying about Saul, the no-good king. And when he realized he was talking to a rock, he cried even louder. Suddenly, a loud voice bellowed,
Sam, stop crying.
Sam was stunned. He recognized it was the voice of God. So he stopped crying and looked around. The voice said,
Don't mourn for Saul. I've chosen a new king.
and Sam said, the voice said,
I'll show you. Then in a Western accent,
my line. Then in a Western accent, the voice said,
I get on and over to Jess's place, partner.
Sam had never heard God speak that way. Neither have I. So he began to chuckle. His chuckles turned into laughter. And then the rock began laughing. And then the audience began laughing. And God said,
Hey, you laughing at me?
Of course, everyone stopped laughing instantly and shook their heads. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a shoe plopped down next to Sam. And God said,
The person who fits this shoe will be the next king.
Sam picked up the shoe and scratched his head. Something about this scenario seemed very familiar to him, and he looked around to see if there were any pumpkin carriages. Then he dropped the shoe on the rock to see if it was made of glass. The rock cried out in pain. Sam apologized to the rock. Well, at least this wasn't a scene from Cinderella, Sam thought. So he went over to Jesse's house and knocked on the door.
Knock, knock.
Jesse answered and immediately fell to the ground before Sam. Jesse's sons all came to the door. And a few girls, because we ran out of boys. When they saw Sam, they too fell to the ground in a huge dog pile. No, they don't want to do that part. Sam thought there had been an earthquake, so he fell to the ground too. Finally, Jesse lifted up his head and said,
Do you come in peace?
You can stand up now. Sam stood up and said, yes, Sam did come in peace. So everyone made the peace sign, even the audience. Sam stepped out of the, and then they all gave each other a big group hug. Not the audience. And Sam stepped out of the huddle and said, the next king of Israel will be the one who fits this shoe. All of Jesse's sons lined up and took off one of their shoes. They held out their feet. Then the smell hit them and everyone plugged their noses. Yes, audience, you may participate here too. Sam walked slowly down the line of sons, looking at their feet and holding the shoe up next to each foot. But he saw that none of these feet fit the shoe, and so he shook his head sadly. But suddenly, at that moment, David walked in. He waved to his dad and said,
Hey, I lost my shoe.
the brothers glared at him, but Sam grinned at him. He ran over to David and knelt down to place the shoe on his foot, and the voice said,
Rise and anoint him. He is the one.
the brothers said, we'll anoint him.
Oh, we will, not me.
Oh, no, you didn't.
No, you really have to anoint him.
Oh, where's the sword?
And before Sam could stop them, they really anointed him. Sam said enthusiastically, "Hail to our king." The brothers knelt and said quite unenthusiastically, "Yeah, hail to our king."
Hail to the Lord.
And the audience said happily, "Hail to the king!" Hail to the king! David wiped his face, vowing then and there never to go near a bath again, though he did once, but that's another story. Should I say Bathsheba?